Hi, I'm Sue and this is Sue Maree P. Today I've got an easy apple cinnamon scroll or cinnamon bun. Delicious straight out of the oven, and if you stick around to the end I'll show you how I do my fancy cream cheese drizzle. Let's get mixing. So in our mixer bowl we're using bread flour today. I'm using strong white bread flour which is high in protein. It's got 13 grams per 100 grams. So our buns or our scrolls will be light and fluffy. Next step, we've got instant yeast. This one doesn't need to be activated, so we just throw that right in. So that's one packet, 7 grams, which is roughly 2 teaspoons. And then we're going to add a pinch of salt. We've got 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and a teaspoon of sugar. Whisk it, mix it. It's what's known as an enriched dough. So we add an egg, just 1 egg beaten. And we've got some milk here that I've warmed up and add a little bit of butter in there. There's 50 grams of butter that I've melted, which is roughly about 3 tablespoons. And I'm using oat milk today. So that's 1 cup or 250 mils. So I'm going to add, actually no, it's 300 mils. And I'm only going to add 250 straight away and reserve some because I may not need it all. So our aim is to get the dough nice and stretchy and moist, but not too wet and not too dry. So we're just going to mix this for roughly about 5 minutes. I'm going to add a little bit more milk. But as I said, I'm reserving about 50 mils just in case you don't need it. Feeling really good, so now I need to set it aside in a warm spot for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on how warm your house is. A tip is if you've got a really cold house, you can turn the oven on and then switch it off again and rest the bowl, a heat-proof bowl, in the oven, and that will help make it rise. So what we want to do is make this double in size, make this double in size. So just before we set it aside, I'm going to sprinkle some flour, and I'm just going to reuse this bowl, and this one comes with a little lid, but if you don't have a fancy lid you can put plastic wrap on top or a damp cloth. So we'll just sit that aside and we'll come back after an hour. So it's been just a little over an hour and our dough is lovely and fluffy. If you press it, it springs back. So it's done and ready to roll out. So I've got a pastry mat here. If you don't have one of those, just flour your bench with a little bit of flour. And we're going to scrape out the dough. Just pop a little bit of flour on my hands and on the roller. We want to try and roll this out so it's a rectangle. I usually do it till about, just show you. This is one of my old baking tins, till it's about that size. So we'll use that as our guide. This dough is really easy to work with. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my tray as a guide and just cut around the excess. So I think it's roughly 30 by 40. Next step, we'll do something with that later. We need to add some butter. So I've just got some room temperature butter here. So we're going to spread that over the dough. We're just leaving about a 1 to 2 centimeter border around the edge. I've got 100 grams of dark brown sugar and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. So I'm just going to pop them in a bowl together and mix them up. So I'll put the 100 grams, which is roughly about half a cup, and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. We're going to sprinkle a generous amount. So I have 1 large green apple, I think it's a brambly apple, and I've got my peeler here, and all I'm going to do is just peel the apple and add the peels on top so it's nice and thin. Next step, grab a pastry brush if you've got one or a little teaspoon, pop it in some water and just moisten the outside edge, that border that you left. And this will help the rolls stick to themselves as we roll it up. Now I want to do lots of scrolls today. I like lots of layers. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start rolling it from the short side. So the one closest to you, we just fold it over and we start rolling it really tightly, or as tight as you can. So now should have 1 long sausage. Grab your knife, cut it in half. We'll go half again. So now it's in 4. And then we're going to divide that evenly. So we've got 1, 2 here. And then we place them into our prepared tin. I'm just using, I should have said before, a 23 centimetre springform tin. And I've just scrunched it with baking paper, with moistened baking paper. I love that method because it just makes it go into the sides a little bit easier. So just make sure that they're not too close together. We need to prove it again for a second time and they'll expand slightly. So there's my cinnamon scrolls. We're going to place them in our warm spot for another 30 minutes so they can increase in size slightly. We're going to place a damp cloth over them. So we've got our damp cloth, place it over. We'll let that sit for 30 minutes, and then in the meantime, let's pop our oven on so it's really hot. So I've got a fan forced oven, so I'm going to pop it on 180, or you can put it on 200. So our cinnamon scrolls have risen a little bit again. So now I'm just going to glaze them before I bake them in the oven. You can either do an egg wash, just beat up an egg and paint some egg on top, but I'm going to use this milk butter mixture that I've got left over. 2 tips before we start baking. I'm going to place some foil underneath this in case it drizzles out. You don't want to mess up your oven. Tip 2, to ensure that we've got a really moist bun and a crispy edge, we're going to place some water at the bottom of the bottom baking tray in my oven. So I've just got some water here, a little glass. There's about half a cup. And now I'll put our buns in for about 20 to 30 minutes. So at the beginning, I promised you a cream cheese drizzle frosting or icing. So I'm putting some cream cheese or Philly cheese. I've got this little individual pots, and that's 35 grams. So I'm going to use 2 of them. Okay, we're going to mix that up first. Next thing we're going to add is 1 tablespoon butter. We'll mix that together. I've got some pre-sifted icing sugar. So we're going to add 35 grams. I don't like my icing too sweet. Now at this stage it's too thick. We want to be able to drizzle this on. So I'm going to add a little bit of milk. So I've got some oat milk here. You can use regular milk too. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon at a time because we may not need it all. It needs to be like pouring cream, so it's still a little bit thick. Okay, I'm going to add the rest of the milk. So we'll keep that out and wait until our buns are ready, cool them slightly, and then drizzle this on top. Our 20-minute timer went off, and I turned my oven off and just sat the scrolls in the warm oven for another 10 minutes. But before we drizzle our frosting on top, we're just going to cool them for another 5 to 10 minutes. But to help it along, I'm just going to remove the ring. So we'll let that sit for another 10 minutes to cool down. So I've got this that we've mixed before. So I'm just going to pour it on in little drizzles. Doesn't have to be perfect. I heard someone the other day said they're going to Jackson Pollock their cake. So this is what we're doing. We're Jackson Pollocking our scrolls. Anyone who doesn't know who Jackson Pollock is, he's an abstract artist who's renowned for splatters on his artwork. Let's cut it open. So time for the taste test. Here's my apple cinnamon scroll. I love the tang of the apple against the warm spices of cinnamon. That's delicious. It's really hard to eat this without making a mess. I might go away off camera and finish this. You know what to do. Thumbs up if you've liked it. Share it with a friend. And thank you for writing your comments below. Keep watching. I'll pop a few more videos at the top. And subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Yeah.